What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we return with Mike of DevilDriver. Great to talk to you again, man.
You too.
It's so awesome to have you here. So, Dealing with Demons Volume 1, scheduled to come out this October. Could the first three singles that you released, Keep Away From Me, Nest of Vipers, and Iona, almost serve as like a clear representation of what the whole album is going to sound like, or is this just scratching the surface for Dealing with Demons?
You know, I think it's just scratching the surface for the most part. We're in the middle of, I'm actually doing some filming for a video tomorrow for a song called Wishing. And for the people that have heard the record, mostly journalists at this point, that's one of the first questions I usually get because the style of the song is definitely very left field for DevilDriver. And, you know, Dez actually does some singing on it. And, yeah, so I think there's, I would say yes and no, actually. I think it is a good representation, but there is a bit more for people to absorb once they hear it.
Mm-hmm. Was there kind of like a preconceived idea of what you wanted Dealing with Demons to sound like, or was there kind of like a lot of improvising involved?
It's a lot of improvising. You know, for the most part, I don't sit down and, especially when I first start writing for a record, I don't sit down and, think to myself, okay, I want the record to be, in this style or that style or, whatever. I just sit down and write, and I kind of just let that take care of itself. The only conversation that Neil and I had before we started writing for this record about what we wanted to do compared to Trust No One was we wanted to slow things down a bit. And not in the sense that the songs would sound slower, but I have found over the years of writing that you can just cram a little bit more ideas into slower tempoed songs. And that's one thing we went to, but I always, at the end of a record, I have a tendency to, I write everything down as far as, what songs I have, what tempo they're in, what key they're in, what tuning we're doing it in, and if I notice that there's an overwhelming amount of songs in a certain area, that I'll try to write something either in a different key, a different tempo, or, use a 7-string or use a baritone, and just to make sure that we're mixing things up.
Mm-hmm. Could this conceptually, or I don't even know if conceptually is the right word, but what I was curious is this more of a follow-up to Outlaws Till the End, or being that, Outlaws to the End was predominantly covers and a little bit more of the experimental side of DevilDriver, this is a little bit more of a follow-up to Trust No One?
This is a follow-up to Trust No One. The Outlaws to the End, I often use the reference, it's just like our version of Metallica's Garage Days. It's just something we wanted to do for fun. We knew a lot of people weren't going to be into it. We did not care. There are a lot of people that were into it. There are a lot of metalheads out there that are into outlaw country, a lot like we are. And we did it for fun. It was just something we wanted to do. We didn't have to do it. It wasn't a money grab. We just, let's put out a cover record and just have some fun. We like working together in the studio, and so that was just more or less I don't even know what you would call it.
Well,
this is something we just kind of threw out there for fun, but yeah. Dealing with Demons is definitely a follow-up to Trust No One.
It's funny. I went to see Kiefer Sutherland's country show back at Irving Plaza last year. And, it's obviously a different scene than normally I hang out with. A couple friends just dragged me to it. And people were asking, what are some of your favorite country artists? And I actually said DevilDriver.
How many people did you draw? Curious.
That was, it was Irving Plaza, so it's an 1,100 cap venue. It was right before they closed for renovations. So, I guess their capacity limit was kind of, sized down to begin with. It was a decent crowd, definitely a smaller crowd for that size, but it was a very intimate show.
Wow. I'm actually a pretty big Kiefer Sutherland fan, mainly because of Stand By Me and the Lost Boys movies.
Yeah, I mean, his band was really good. It was really tight, so.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I gotta look that up.
Yeah, you won't regret it, I promise. Now, one thing I was curious about is, as a big fan of DevilDriver, I would be able to tell what, if you played me like 30 seconds of a song, I could tell that that's off of Pray for Villains, or that's off of Beast, Winter Kills, and even going down to The Last Kind Words. Like, I feel like every album really stands out. So it's fair to say that DevilDriver has always kind of like taken a new approach to every album, right?
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that it's something that we do consciously, but I kind of had this epiphany a while ago about writing and when I sit down to write these days, and I know I'm going to be doing it all day or all week or whatever, for the most part, I'll either turn my phone upside down and turn it off, or I'll even not bring it in my room with me or into my studio. Because I found that, at least for me, whatever you write, for the most part, can only be written at that exact moment in time. If you get up, leave, come back, which sometimes you have to do in order to write, because if you sit down in one place too much, at least me, I have to take breaks. I have to get out of my studio, I have to go do something, and then come back in order to keep writing. But if I get interrupted, I don't think things would sound the same as they would even, 5 minutes before I got interrupted.
Yeah, that's the biggest mystery of art.
Every record, yeah, you're literally creating something out of nothing. And so I think all of our records basically represent the writers in different periods of time. So it's going to be different. Now, I know there are a lot of bands out there that, there's a certain, maybe some of the records don't sound a whole lot different from one another, but I think in our case, yeah, it's just, and DevilDriver is kind of a melting pot of writers, There's always been at least 3, and sometimes 4 people bringing ideas to the table instrumentally, and then you had Dez in at the end. But, I think that's a big reason why our records do have, a different style to each one of them. And, like Dealing with Demons, we had a very brief discussion about slowing things down. On Beast, that was totally not the case. Beast was the record where we sped everything up. And, Pray for Villains, I would say, that was a record where the band finally let me really bring a lot of ideas to the table. I wrote a couple songs on Fury. I wrote a little bit more, on Last Kind Words, like Clouds Over California, and probably like 3 or 4 others. And then Pray for Villains, I've been in the band long enough and been in the club long enough where everyone started letting their guard down a little bit and letting me bring more ideas to the table. And that, in essence, dramatically changed the way things sounded.
Did you write the guitar intro for End of the Line? Because that intro is so atmospheric. I consider that, and I'm not like saying this to Brown Nose by any means, but I think that is one of like at least the best introductions to a record of your style.
No, I did not. I didn't have anything to do with that. Actually, when that whole thing was written, I was sleeping, and our old bass player John Miller and drummer John Berkland, they wrote that at this place called Sonic Ranch, where outside of El Paso, Texas, where we did Fury, Last Kind Words, and we did Beast there, and it wrote the intro for End of the Line.
You mentioned that like these are like a self-portrait of who you are, like, and you mentioned that like I really like that you brought this up because it's a big mystery. If you didn't write the song at that place at that particular time, if you didn't obviously it wouldn't sound the way it is. Do you almost find it easier to come up with riffs or come up with ideas when you're in isolation, you're alone with your guitar, nobody bothers you, or do you find it a little bit easier when you're sort of collaborating with the other members?
Both. I like to come up with core ideas on my own. So at least I have something to bring to the table, and I can show to Neil and Austin while they're here. And a lot of times I'll have a lot of ideas, and I'm just, I can be very, very indecisive of what I want to use in here? Should we use this transition? Or should I play the riff like this? Should I play it like this? Should I play it like that? And I'll come up with a bunch of ideas, and I'll show them to Neil and Austin, and usually both of them will agree on the same thing. And then it's like, okay, good. Now I don't have to ponder over this anymore, and I can move on, and we're just going to go with this idea. And, Neil will do the same thing where he'll do demos at his house and throw them in Dropbox, and I'll just go through and listen to them. And when he comes over, I'll just be like, I really like this song. Let's work on it. I got some ideas for it, and we'll just, record it into my computer at home, program drums on it. Austin will be here, portraying to me what kind of beat I think, should be programmed over it until we end up doing drums, in the studio for real. Mm-hmm. But that's pretty much how the process goes. And I have written parts of songs on tour, but I generally don't write well in that sense. I'll come up with some ideas here and there and record them into my phone or something like that. And then when I get home from tour, I'll just kind of, go through all my ideas and be like, oh, yeah, I remember that, and then I'll expand on it. But as far as whole songs, that doesn't happen a whole lot on tour. At home, I like to be isolated. I like to be in my studio. I do not want to be interrupted. And if my girlfriend wants to hang out here and chill on the couch in the studio while I'm writing, that's perfectly fine. But she's pretty much the only one that I wouldn't mind having around while I'm writing.
I mean, that's maybe. Does she ever help influence it?
No. I'm sure I have ran ideas by her, like, what do you like better, this or this? And, she's a pretty big metalhead. I like that better. I'm like, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll get back to work.
Yeah. It's always great to have constructive feedback because isolation helps. Is such a great fuel for creativity, but I imagine like extra input, it never hurts too.
Yeah, my roommate Patrick, he actually plays guitar with Lita Ford, and so he's a very talented guitar player, and he's got his own studio in the house as well, and so he and I have a tendency to go grab each other and be like, dude, I need you to come listen to me and listen to this and tell me what you think. And so if I'm stuck in a rut and no one else in the band is around, I'll go ask Patrick. He always gives me some good feedback.
Do you ever wake him up at the most inconvenient time being like, yo, I got this riff, and he's like, get out of here, I'm sleeping?
No. If he's sleeping, then I'll leave him alone. I can always ask him the next day.
Do you have a theoretical background behind your guitar playing? Like, do you know like what scale and key you're working off of? Does that come into play at all, or are you more on the self-taught side?
Both. When I was 13 or 14, I started taking lessons from a guy that started teaching me music theory. And then when I went to college, I was a music major, so I expanded on all that knowledge. And music theory was a little confusing to me, when I was younger. There was like, okay, I get this, but everything in between is still kind of confusing for me. And when I went to college and became a music major, all those gaps started to get filled in because I was only taking guitar lessons like once a week, once every other week, something like that. And in college, you're there 5 days a week doing music, and then I'd go home on the weekends and continue doing it. But it's just like 7 days a week. It's just music. And you're around people that are better than you in certain areas, and some of them are a lot better than the way you are. And being around people in a classroom environment is so important to develop your skills, because if you see people getting better than you, you don't want to be the person that's at the bottom of the barrel. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult. There was literally, I want to say about 60 to 70 people in the music program the year I started, and by the end of the year, I think there was only 25 of us left. Everyone quit.
Wow.
It was just too much for them, because our teachers were brutal, and they purposely hit you really, really hard in the beginning because they want to weed out the people that aren't committed enough.
Yeah. Well, is it like that movie Whiplash? Is that a clear representation of it?
No, dude, I turned that fucking movie off. I hated that movie. That's such... I couldn't even get through it, because honestly, if I had a music teacher that talked to me like that, I'd probably slap him in the face and walk out of the room. I don't... People shouldn't be learning an instrument out of fear. You're supposed to enjoy it. And, you know, you can be pushed, but, you know, I don't think getting yelled at like that is a good way to learn. You know, you're gonna, every time you sit down to play that instrument, you're gonna associate it with anger, and who wants that? Anger and fear. No, so
metal.
Yeah, but everything kind of went a different direction. So I had this very theoretical way of writing music, but the other three guys in the original lineup of DevilDriver, they all were more self-taught and didn't know any theory. They just went by their ear. So they would write these riffs that, in my mind, were not correct. But I was stuck in this theoretical bubble on how to write. I was sticking to the rules too much, and it took me a while to try to figure out, like, okay, there is music theory, but it's more like a guideline on what to do. And all my music was sounding like rewritten classical music for the most part, in some ways. So when I started learning their songs and watching them write and writing with them, I really, over time, stepped out of that bubble, and I write more in a sense of what sounds good. Like, okay, that note is not in the scale, so actually I'm going to see what that note sounds like.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes I want things to sound almost wrong, or just kind of trail out of the key for a second and then, you know, travel back into it, and just mixing things up, you know, using more dissonance in my guitar writing rather than everything being power chords all the time.
Yeah.
Using more thirds, more fourths, rather than just using fifths, you know. But that's for the most part, you know, most of Metallica's riffs are based around power chords, and I learned so much Metallica when I was a kid that it kind of stuck with me. I learned too much Metallica when I was a kid.
Yeah. Well, I think you have the best of both worlds. You know the rules, and it always works to your advantage. Whether you're using it or not, it's always good to know it. But then you also know what you're breaking when you have to break the rules. I think you have a good dichotomy in your guitar playing.
Yeah, and I'll use that to my advantage sometimes. You know, it's like, I remember Berkland came over one time back in the day, and he had the song, and he had a midsection, and he couldn't figure out how to transition from, you know, the root of the main part of the song into the midsection that he wanted to use for the song, and then get out of it and, you know, play the chorus again or whatever it was. I don't even remember what song it was. Actually, I think it was Ruthless, the first song off of Winter Kills. And just from my knowledge of theory, you know, it's just like, okay, I know he wants to go here, and here's where we are, so we need to find the common note from both keys and write a riff that transitions one into the other, and that's basically what we did. I don't think I would have been able to do that so quickly without, you know, having some knowledge of theory.
Mm-hmm. I learned from my guitar teacher a really good way to remember all the scale modes, like Mixolydian and Dorian and Phrygian. He tells us, all of the students, it's I don't particularly like midgets attacking ladies. I've never forgotten any single scale mode after that.
I've never heard that one before.
He made it up. So, just
whatever works.
Yeah, exactly. I have a couple more questions for you. And by the way, going back to Whiplash, I do want to say that started the most annoying trend at concerts. Whenever like a band was about to go on and they did the last minute drum fill checks, everybody screamed a line from the teacher in that movie, just in between.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So if you thought you couldn't hate that movie more, I gave you another reason for it.
Yeah, I tried to watch it on a plane, and I was like, maybe 20 minutes to 30 minutes in, and I'm like, nope, not for me.
Better than when I...
It's probably something like, I can't watch... Point Break is acceptable, but any other surfing movie like Chasing Mavericks, I couldn't watch it. Because I'm like, this is not what it's like. It must be like a doctor watching, ER or something like that back in the day. It just must have drove him crazy because it's just like, this is so ridiculous how they're portraying things.
Yeah. And the last two questions I have for you is, really, what do the other members have against I Dreamed I Died? Why won't you guys play that anymore?
We used to play it quite a bit, but we just got a lot of records these days, and we try to mix things up a little bit. And it's just kind of the way things go. You end up playing some songs, and over the course of time, they get phased out because you've got more records.
Yeah, I remember when I first interviewed you on the Super Joint tour, and you were like, "Oh, like you said, like some of the members aren't too fond of that anymore." I'm like, "Why?"
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I remember Austin saying at one point he wasn't a big fan of that song, but I like that song. I've always liked playing it live. I got nothing against it.
Yeah, bring it back. Bring it back for nostalgia.
Yeah. I'll see what I can.
Yeah, true. But thanks a lot, Mike, so much. Everybody, we are here with Mike of DevilDriver. Be sure to pick up Dealing with Demons out on Napalm Records this October. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.